difference between a thing and the concept of a thing. You can never, yeah, so most people, you can never quite it's not that people don't understand this concept. They do. It's that there's a difference between vaguely, like conceptually understanding this and actually really sitting down and thinking what that actually means when you think about things, or when you apply concepts to reality. The idea is this: your concept of a thing is not the thing. There is a difference between the understanding that happens here and the actual thing that exists. There's a difference between, for example, the table in front of me and my concept of the table in front of me. And it seems obvious. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? It's very difficult for people to really conceive of that. All right, most people don't. Most people think that's what they're thinking. Very strange thing to say. There's a lot more I can say on that topic. I'm sure I will at some point. But let's stick to the basics here. Most people think that their idea is the thing. What does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? So, I guess at the top level, it tends to mean that people always think they're right. And you talk as if you think you're right. And so, but that's, yes, that's true, but that's more of an emotional play on things, and it's more of another subject. I'm really more talking about the fundamentals here. Categorization is a great example of this problem. Right, so we tend to think about, say, a table as a table. This is where the ship of Theseus concept comes about, right? If I cut the legs off of a table, is it still a table? If I put if I put a giant ballast on this, floated on a lake somewhere, is it still a table? If I cut it in half, is it a table? In our manipulation of the reality of a thing, we are able to play with the idea of the difference between the concept and the reality, the different forms of this object that I would call table as I manipulate it, showing, or should be showing, all of us that our concept is a broad representation and not the actual thing. Our manipulation of the physical world in this little thing here that sits below the camera is not the same as the conceptual thing that I have in my mind. I can do things to this that don't change this, and I can do things to this that don't change that. I can imagine it as 4 legs and a surface. This thing in here is a collection of stuff. The ideas sit in here. This thing is also a collection of stuff, but it is not the same thing as this thing. And this goes deeper. Becomes more basic. Mathematics. People assume there's a lot of people out there that would argue that mathematics is somehow ubiquitous, somehow like is the universe somehow. The universe is mathematics. That is wrong. That is fundamentally wrong. Here's why. This is a debate that rages on. Most people on both on sides of this think that they've won it, but also think that opinions are opinions. But so then if you lay out something that is somewhat definitive, then it's so mathematics kind of frames, it frames so much of how we think. It's just the nature of reality. And so when you construct ideas in your head, you're trying to create a picture in here that looks a little like over there. But the difficulty there is that you then have to somehow, like, first of all, it's impossible. It's just, this is smaller than everything else around you. So the only way for you to kind of conceptualize all of the information that's coming in is to A, get rid of some of it, a lot of it, and B, create categorization, create kind of like an idea of an object. Something that like immediately frames a thing so that you don't have to process all the information coming to you from everything. You can just kind of go, the brain can go like, oh, that's a thing. That's a general shape that I've seen before, and I implant it, rinse, like something that's repeatable, basically. I see an object, it vaguely looks like a thing. I don't have to take in all of the information. Every little color, every little photon that's hitting that little cell right there. And just basically vaguely, that's a towel, that's a spray can. Which then means I can then go, well, that's 2 spray cans, that's 3 spray cans, because then it means like there's a repeatable thing. And that's what numbers are, right? Like it's, there's no difference between the 1 in 1 and the 1 in 2, right? Because if you divide, like in counting, you're just going to 1, and then there's another 1, and that's 2, and there's another 1. But what are the ones, right? In order to have the ones to add up to be 2 and 3 and 4, in order to have numbers, in order to have mathematics, you need some kind of concept of categorization, of repeatability. And repeatability only comes if you have like something to repeat, a concept, like a pure, perfect concept to repeat. From what I outlined earlier, the very idea of categorization removes a lot of information about the thing that you are categorizing. To call it a spray can or a table gets rid of all of the stuff and all of the patterns within this thing that you are perceiving. It simply creates a picture in your head, which, even if you could define that all the way down to the very atoms, you're still losing something. You're always losing something. No, it's worse than that. Because the thing isn't in here. So you actually never had the definition in the first place. It will always only ever be a representation. A perfect form in your head. An image that is replicable in here, that you can use to frame the real world out there. But it is not the same thing. So, no matter how far down you go, you always have a number, you always have a segment of a thing, you always have some kind of repeatable image in your head. You have to do that in order to create the repeatability for mathematics in the first place. It's so not the real world. It is, you know, at best, like a vague interpretation. It misses out a lot, and a more complex view of mathematics shows this obviously with calculus, right? Like calculus, differential calculus is by its very nature an admittance that our system of counting does not work. It does not explain reality. And so there are various contrivances one makes in mathematics through the concept of limits and you know, kind of smudging the idea of 0 divided by 0 yeah, in order to kind of get to this idea of like how things change and the difference between two things, which again is the representation of the concept that we can't understand because of the idea of numbers in the first place as a static concept. Categorization is a representation of the concept that the thing in here is not the thing out there. People are certain. You do it. We all do it. Not just in some kind of vague idea like mathematics. We do it inch by inch, every day, every moment. Like we're not party to the reality of the thing outside of our own heads. It doesn't occur to us to imagine the universe outside of our perception of it. We cannot possibly. Right? I've heard it said that color is an illusion. That's wrong. Well, actually, it's right in the sense. It's more accurate to say that everything is an illusion. All experience is an illusion.
The only way that you understand everything about the world you experience, including the colors that you see, is from your perspective. If you are somehow able to jump outside of your perspective, then you would have no context for anything. But then you'd have no perception of anything either, or you'd have some entirely new perception. You see the world through photons interacting with various proteins in some of the cells in your eye. If there wasn't that mechanism, then you have no perspective on what light is. And it's not even a thing that exists. One could imagine an entirely new sense, maybe like the distortion of space and time. People who know what that is will know what it is. That is something outside of our very minds. We are locked in our own heads.
Well, this is for the most part well-trodden ground. That many philosophers discard. I guess Socrates. Go read if you really want to. There's much more complexity here, but I guess this was something that these are ideas that I came about of my own self independently, and then later on read and went, oh, that's the idea I came about before and fleshed out. So I do want to start with the basics of the way I see the world, and there's going to be overlap with what's already been said. If you want to read something more interesting, well, maybe, I don't know. If you want to, get a better idea of the stuff, like a more in-depth idea of the stuff, then that would be the place to go. But I'm not here to do that. I'm here to give you my perspective. Because, you know what?
The universe can't be simply about taking someone else's idea and writing about it. We have to be original. At least sometimes.
Otherwise, we're just, we're always just saying the thing that someone else has said with a few more words. And I think that's a lot, and that's very important, and it's very necessary, and for a lot of reasons. But yeah, anyway, we are the world. We are the universe. Everything happens here within me. And if everything happens within me, the only real illusion is that there is something else out there. It has to be. It has to be. I can imagine an outside perspective. Like, I can imagine the real world. What does this mean? What does this mean? It means you're always wrong. It means you are always wrong. It means everything you ever say, do, think, at least in terms of anything outside of yourself,
will always be an imperfect representation in your mind.
I remember being starting to really kind of frame this up first year high school, I think, really solidifying this. I remember walking to high school and walking back, and on the walks, framing the concept like I have to eliminate categorization as much as possible. I think that was not necessarily wrong, but categorization leads us to incorrectly define things. As I was walking back, it's like, this apple, we call it an apple, but, actually it's, how deep do you go, right? That's the problem. Okay, well, it's an apple, it's skin and flesh. Well, the flesh is made of cells, well, mostly dead cells, at that point, and, those cells are made of atoms. Those atoms are made of electrons and protons and neutrons and gluons and quarks. You have to be able to talk with another person. You can't sit there and describe the universe every time you talk to someone. But you also want to recognize when your perspective, when the framework within your head is destructive in a sense that's beneficial for you, right? Like, seeing the world too plainly, good and evil. You have some vague collection of patterns, of natures, of things that you ascribe to the word good. So when you see them, they're the thing that you react to, evil, quote unquote. But they're just things that are happening in the world. They're just things that are happening, and you're placing a label on that. But the thing is that what you've done is you've massively over-categorized. Like you've just put a giant tent around, various actions that are totally different from each other in reality. For instance, cheating. Someone puts card A down, I put card B down, but then I could look away and I slip the card in, I slip it for another card that I know is better. And then someone's sitting to my right, someone's sitting over there, this person to my right, kind of saw that, giggles, very naughty. Because there are three friends sitting around and it's a relaxing game and just horsing around. Someone might put a giant tent around that concept, right? Put that in the evil one. I don't know, two people flirting, being a bit mischievous in the things they say to each other. Whereas in the real world, what's actually happening is you know, this person says a thing and smiles. This person over here says a thing and smiles back. Or, you know, this person puts a card there and this other person smiles and laughs and the other person smiles. It's the recognition of the reality of the thing. It's a recognition of the reality of the thing. Yeah. I mean, look, that's probably more. I'm probably latching onto the emotionality of the concept as opposed to the rigorousness of the thing. But I guess it's a good motivator.
So, what to take from this? Perhaps try not to take yourself too seriously. Try not to take your perception of the world too seriously. Never assume you are absolute. Because the only way that you could truly understand the world is to be it, and you will never be it. Nothing will ever be everything. And so you must accept that your perception is always imperfect. Hold on to that. That idea is more powerful than you know.